On today's question of faith, how can you use social media to evangelize young people? Hey everybody, this is Question of Faith. I am Mike Hayes. I'm the Director of Young Adult Ministry in the Diocese of Cleveland.
And I'm Father Damian Ferentz, the Vicar for Evangelization.
And I'm Cari Reagan, the Youth Ministry Specialist.
Yes, you are.
Yes, I am.
Welcome back, Cari Reagan, to the
Thank
show.
you.
Have you ever been here by yourself?
I have not been here by myself.
Okay, you've always been with
Just
your
with
your partner in crime, Francine Costantini of the Youth Ministry Office. So it's great to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so, Cari, you do a lot with social media. So if I'm someone who's thinking about doing this, how should I start?
How should you start? That's a good question. We use social media in our daily lives, or many of us do. And it is well known that many young people do as well. And so the church has a responsibility to be where the people are.
Amen.
Indeed.
I think, hasn't Pope Francis said that in a number of different ways, and other saints as well?
Pope Benedict, I know, was the first pope to be on Twitter. I remember he pressed the first tweet at, just went boop, and he invited priests to be on, so yeah.
Yeah. So we have a responsibility to be where the people are. So that means to be out on the streets. That means to be at the sporting events, and of course that also means to be on social media. So the church has this responsibility to be there, to spread the good news, to evangelize, and to be a presence there. It's not necessarily the most major place of encounter that someone is going to automatically read a tweet or see a picture on Instagram or watch a TikTok and be 100% converted. But it's a place of small conversion. It's a place of encounter. And it's a place to just kind of begin those conversations and open our hearts and minds to God. Or take a break in the day and recall, while we're reading something, while we see something, recall our faith and maybe take a moment to step back and pray.
Yeah, I used to accentuate relationships that you already have as well. If there are people who are already active in youth ministry or young adult ministry, that they might follow you on your various social media platforms, and that might accentuate a relationship. They might see something, I didn't know Cari knew about that. I should ask her more about that next time. I didn't know Cari knew this about this saint or this teaching or whatever it is.
So if you're a pastor at a parish and you say, I want to reach young people and I want to do this, what would you suggest? Where do you need to be in order to engage young people?
Well, there's kind of your major social media platforms right now, which would be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And so some of them are easier to do than others, and they have different audiences as well. I even was watching, I don't watch TikTok a ton, but I try and know what's going on and whatnot. And I think she's a chef. She was just talking about how she posted, because sometimes you cross-post things onto different sites, because the media that's created is good for multiple things. But she said that she posted something on Instagram Reels, and she was getting, heated in the comments over, a little bit of joke that she made. And it was, a pretty, simple joke. I can't remember what it was, but the Instagram Reels comments were heated, versus when she posted it on TikTok, people thought it was hilarious. Because I think the joke had to do with some kind of audio that had been going around on TikTok. So people on TikTok knew about it. They thought it was funny. But the people on Instagram Reels were like, that was wrong to say.
Interesting.
So there's different audiences on them, different audiences in that way of like Instagram might be a little bit more, professional is not the word, but just a little bit
more sophisticated.
Yeah, sure. A little bit more sophisticated than TikTok. TikTok's maybe a little bit more ground level, but also in terms of population that you're talking to, Instagram and TikTok are certainly a younger generation. TikTok being the youngest, although there's people of all ages that are on TikTok. TikTok might be more your Gen Z. Instagram might be more your millennials.
And Gen X.
And Gen X, yeah, of course.
Just saying.
I was going to say there's lots of people on it. Yeah. But Facebook is like kind of like your older crowd. So like when I think about it and talk to youth ministers about it, like I generally say Instagram is your teens, Facebook is your parents.
Oh,
so you
good.
can kind of change your content in that way and understand like it's really good for the youth group to post on Instagram the pictures from the night or the retreat or whatever for the teens because they love to see what's going on. They love to see pictures of their friends, but then cross-post to Facebook because the parents also love to see what's going on and also love to see what they did at retreat. And then even the parish itself, if you have a youth ministry page and a parish page, the parish can then share on Facebook and reach Betty that sits in the front row at daily mass, and she can see what the youth group is doing as well and kind of just have a general know of what's happening in the parish.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. So I started doing all kinds of social media stuff back at the turn of the century, as we like to say, for those of us who are Gen Xers. Father, thank you very much.
God bless you. Had to start somewhere.
But I remember when we started Busted Halo, we started that name came from a young adult group in the Bronx, right? They thought that was a good name, and so we started testing it with various audiences, and we intentionally tested it with baby boomers. Because we were after Gen X and millennials at the time, right? And the baby boomers all hated the name. Like, there goes the church. Told us that we're all broken again. I said, well, first of all, we said busted, but second of all, sure. And then we tested it with younger people, and they all universally laughed, but they also universally loved the name. And we're like, I think we have something here. It's sort of similar to what you were saying before. Is like, sometimes you look at these two different audiences and they'll just react differently, and you'll say, okay, there's something there. Let's start moving in this direction. What are some things that you do on social media, like like on your Instagram account, let's say?
Yeah, so I run the youth ministry pages. So I'll specifically talk about our pages CLEYouthMin, so CLEYouthMin. And so I tend to just share a little bit of what's on my heart, because sometimes it's like, oh, like this keeps coming up, like maybe we should share some posts about it, or things to do with the liturgical season, saints' feast days, the readings of the day, what's going on, pictures from our events, and so I kind of I just started, I know tomorrow is March, but I was just looking out at March and figuring out what's going to come up for the month. And so, I mean, the way that I start is I take a look at the month and I look at the major feast days in the month, the saints' days, especially ones that are going to resonate most with teens, because my primary audience is youth ministers and teens. I know that there's a lot of people that follow it. A lot of my friends follow it because I say, you should follow this. Because I also generally try to be a good follow. Something that's going to bring some light to your feed and just kind of pull you out of the scroll for a second to think or read something else. But yeah, it just kind of depends on the season. Like in October, I shared a lot about occult practices in the church, and those ended up being really, really popular because people wanted to know and wanted to learn a little bit more. So I learned from that, like, okay, well, what else should we teach people about? So what's the meaning of Halloween? Why do we actually celebrate this? And then going into recently in February 2nd was Candlemas. So what is Candlemas?
Yeah.
Because people don't really know what that is. The Feast of the Presentation of the Lord. Right. So it's a little bit of mix of both, and some fun things, some silly things. Like in July, it's about mid-July, somewhere in the teens, is National Ice Cream Day. And so
right. I remember this one, yeah.
I posted who's going to be the patron saint of ice cream, because I think it could be me, but I want to see if there's some competition out there.
The other thing I'd say about your feed or what do you call it? Is that your
Yeah,
pages?
Sure.
Is they're highly intelligent too. And so Cari Reagan won't tell you this, but we've known each other since you were in high school because you participated in Tole Lege before your senior of high school. So it's a little camp we run out of the seminary. And then she went to Walsh University. And listeners, you can't see this, but before her is her senior thesis, which is the length of a master's thesis. It's over 80 pages long. And I'd like you to talk to us a little bit about this, because this isn't something that Cari's like, well, I just naturally have gifts. You do, but you also did a ton of research. And on top of that, you were a youth minister for 4 years at a parish, so you had experience doing this as a youth minister, and now you're working for the diocese. So in your young years, you have gained a lot of wisdom and experience to share. So would you tell us a little bit about your research and how that informs what you do now?
Sure, yeah. So when I was in college, I almost said high school. When I was in college at Walsh University, I was in the honors program, and we had to do a senior thesis. There weren't very many theology theses to look at and figure out what I was going to do. But one of the things that I had decided early on was that I wanted to do something that was going to be very practical, that would benefit the church practically. There's a lot of good things to be said and done for high theological and philosophical thinking, but that's just not who I am. I'm much more a practical person. So
this is why we love you, Cari.
Thanks.
Nothing against speculative theology, by the way. It's just like
right. This is why we love her.
It's
we love
pastoral theology.
We love other people for their highfalutin ideas.
Exactly.
We love Cari for this.
Yeah.
So I decided to do a project, and I don't know how I arrived at the topic, but my topic was called Ministry in the Digital Age, the Use of New Media to Promote Fruitful Youth Ministry in the 21st Century. So what I did was I sampled through a survey youth ministers in the Diocese of Cleveland. I want to say I got about 50 responses, which is actually
that's pretty good.
Very impressive, considering sometimes we send out surveys and we get like 10. So this was a really good response. Very, very thankful for their participation, even though this was back quite a few years now. And just asked them about their use of social media in their youth ministry, and then took a look at all of the things that the church had to say about youth ministry and media, and all of the things that the church had to say about youth ministry, and just kind of synthesize them together, and came up with the findings that I had were pretty much, and this is dated now. Like I knew the second it was published, it was dated. We were talking about media, and media moves so quickly.
Sure.
So, but pretty much what I've already said is Facebook is great to use for the parents. Instagram was great to use for the teens. This was published before TikTok was even really on the scene. And just some of the dangers and worries of it were kind of included in there, and the cautions to youth ministers, but not being afraid to meet the youth on social media. Because you might have kids that come once a month, and what is the way that you're interacting with them in between? If you can't be there holding their hand or see, like, if they're not coming, this is a place that you can encounter them and continue to help them encounter Christ on those in-betweens, whether that's Sunday to Sunday, whether that's like Wednesday to Wednesday, or whether that's month to month. And so, the bishops have found media, they said, to be a great service to mankind and a tool that is made it easy to spread and support the kingdom of God. And so I think following their words, it's best for us to use it and share it with people.
Yeah, I know Bishop Barron would often say if St. Paul had the ability to get the message out the way that we do today, he'd go absolutely nuts, and which is what we're supposed to be doing, using technology to spread the gospel, tell the good news.
Yeah, we're all extending the ministry of Jesus Christ, right? You know, Jesus was an itinerant preacher. That was the media of the day. St. Paul was a letter writer, you know, and that's how he communicated, you know. other people did other things. Fulton Sheen used the television when it was early on.
Well, and we talk about like social media now because social media is the media of the day, but like the Bible was the first book on the printing press. Mm-hmm. There's obvious reasons for that. That's a pioneer of new media at the time. New media today is TikTok.
It's TikTok, right.
Mm-hmm.
But the Bible on the printing press, that was huge. That was groundbreaking. And so what do we do now to continue that?
Well, even think of Father Mike Schmidtz doing the Bible in a year, the Catechism in a year, and these are the #1 podcasts in the world.
Well, even things like Hallow.
The
prayer app, like, I think within the last week, they were the #3 app, like, period. And that's just amazing. Yeah. Especially, like, during the season of Lent. They've got an awesome Lent program going on.
Do. Good Lenten playlist.
Yeah, exactly. And so they're using the new media that we have to spread and spread the gospel message.
Yeah.
It's sort of similar to the way Theology on Tap works, right? It's like people won't go to, they might not darken the door of a church because that's too intimidating, right? Mm-hmm. But they'll go to the bar, right?
Yeah.
Or their friends might not want to they might not accept an invitation from someone to go to church, but they'll accept an invitation for someone to go to a bar. This is sort of similar, like, I'll follow an Instagram account.
Yeah.
That's kind of low level, right?
And exactly, like, I've had friends reach out to me and be like, hey, I'm giving up, like, my secular podcast for Lent. And they're not super Catholic, but they understand the importance of Lent and they get that. And so they'll reach out and be like, so what are some faith podcasts that you like? Because I don't think that I can listen to nothing when I'm at the gym, but I want to, like, if I'm not going to listen to, Crime Junkie or whatever the top, like, podcasts are, what are some good ones that I can listen to instead?
Yeah. And you've made some playlists for things before, haven't you?
Yeah, we have a Spotify page. Again, the same CLEYouthMin.
Okay.
I'm working on possibly getting a Lenten playlist together. That's part of my March plan. So,
excellent.
But there's a couple things on there.
So tell our listeners where they could find you again. On what's the hashtag or whatever it is, the handle.
Our handle is CLEYouthMin. So CLEYouthMin.
And we'll put that in the show notes. And sometimes we find you in a church. And so Mary Queen of Apostles is the place we'll go today. It's in Brook Park. They'll be one of our 9 Nights parishes, which is coming up on March 17th through the 25th to the Feast of the Annunciation. Yeah,
Mary Queen of the Apostles is one of the more creative names that Bishop Lennon and his staff and a reconfiguration thought of, because there were 2 parishes in Brook Park, Assumption of Mary and St. Peter, the Apostle. Mm-hmm. So they combined those 2 parishes, and it took on a new name, Mary, Queen of the Apostles. Father Jim Stanger is the pastor there. He's a great guy, big fan of baseball. I used to play tennis with him a lot. He had some elbow issues recently, so he doesn't play as much anymore. But nice parish, very close to the airport. So if you ever want to get to Mass before you get on a plane or right when you get off, Mary Queen of the Apostles is the closest parish to the Cleveland Hopkins Airport.
My classmate Del Sherman is doing his field ed there at Mary Queen of the Apostles. And Father Rob Reedy recently, who helps out there, he was our presider for Mass on Saturday and talked to us after Mass a little bit about his work that he's done in El Salvador.
Oh, cool.
And through Migrant Refugee Services as well, that he's doing a lot with that now here in the diocese. So he's trying to get the diaconate formation involved in helping people who are coming from Ukraine.
Cool.
So that's great.
Very good.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then our readings this week are the second Sunday of Lent. Let's take a look at the Gospel, shall we? It's the Transfiguration this week from Matthew. Jesus took Peter, James, and John, his brother, and led them up a high mountain by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. Father, what does that mean? He was transfigured before them.
That he showed his glory to them. It's a preview of what's going to happen in the resurrection. But first, of course, he has to suffer and die and be buried and then rise again from the dead. So he's giving them a little preview of what's to come. When I think of the Transfiguration, I think of 2 things. One, peacocks. Because the peacock is the symbol of the Transfiguration. When the peacock's feathers are down, it kind of looks just like an ugly chicken or bird. And then all of a sudden, when the peacock throws its feathers up, you're like, oh my gosh, that's glorious. Actually, Flannery O'Connor has an essay called The King of the Birds where she writes about this. And secondly, about 6 years ago, I went on pilgrimage with 10 brother priests from the Diocese of Cleveland, and we ascended Mount Tabor.
Ah, right.
And celebrated Mass up there. And guess what's all over the place? Not live peacocks, but a bunch of images of peacocks in the stained glass windows and around. So I think of peacocks, of course, Christ's glory.
Nice.
How about Carrie Shell? You got any ideas, thoughts?
Yeah, maybe not necessarily.
Cari Reagan used to be Shell.
Yeah.
See, you didn't even flinch.
I was so worried that I was going to introduce myself as Carrie Shell instead of Cari Reagan, and I have to apologize to John. But it says Jesus took Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And I just think that this reading also, though the transfiguration is super important, obviously that's what the story's about, and awesome, it also just kind of speaks to discipleship and the ability that Jesus had. He had 12, but he had 3 in the 12. And the way that you pour into people, because you can't reach everyone. I mean, Jesus fed 5,000 people, and he can preach to 5,000 people, but he doesn't, well, he's Jesus, so he probably could. But he doesn't really know 5,000 people. He knows 12 really well, and he knows 3 really, really well. And so it's kind of, he sets up the model of discipleship for us and shows us how to do it in our own lives.
Yeah. On the other side of the mountain is Jerusalem, and Peter wants to camp out instead. He wants to say, stay here. I like the other version of this story. I think it's in Luke where it says, let me build 3 tents here, but he did not know what he was saying. I think it's the funniest words in the gospel. But then Jesus comes and tells them to not be afraid. And that they're going to need courage to go forward from this place, because you got to come down the mountain eventually. So all that's good. Cari Reagan, thanks for joining us here on Question of Faith.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
And we'll have you back for sure.
Of course.
Maybe some other Gen Xers will join us.
Or a Zoomer.
Yeah, that's right.
And you're millennial. You're barely millennial, right?
I'm like barely a millennial, but
you're on the cusp.
I'm right in that cusp.
Yeah.
The change in between the two. I remember 9/11. But I also grew up with a good amount of social media.
Right. And we'll have this and a whole lot more next time on Question of Faith.